I heard the sound before I saw anything. The gentle lapping of water against the shore, soft as a whisper, yet carrying an eerie weight in the still night air. The moon barely hung above the loch, casting pale reflections that rippled like something was moving beneath the surface. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shadows. That's when I saw it. It just stood there, just on the edge of the water, silhouetted by the moonlight. A horse. Or something like a horse. Its coat was slick and black, like the surface of the loch itself, dripping with a wetness that seemed unnatural, as though it were part of the water rather than emerging from it. Its mane hung long and matted, water streaming from each strand. But it was its eyes. Those eyes, they held me in place. Deep, dark pools reflecting nothing, swallowing everything in their great gaze. There was something almost hypnotic about them, something that whispered to me, coaxed me to step forward. It moved toward me, its hooves making no sound on the pebbled shore. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed to turn and flee, but my feet wouldn't obey. Instead, I took a step closer, and then another, and then another. Its head dipped slightly, as if it were waiting for me, even inviting me. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, wrapping around me like a shroud. Then, just as I reached out to touch it, something shifted in its form. The outlines of the horse blurred, and for a moment, I thought I saw something far worse beneath its surface. A grotesque, twisted shape hidden under the waterlogged skin. Before I could react, it bolted, galloping back into the loch with unnatural speed, vanishing beneath the surface. The water stilled, but the air remained thick with dread, and I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever that thing was, it wasn't just a horse. The thing, from the account, is the Kelpie. And yes, they actually do have quite a few things kind of like this, similar in Scotland with different names. Could they be the same thing? Possible. But let's dig into it just a little bit further. The Kelpie, a name that sends shivers from the spines of those who live near Scotland's many lochs and rivers. A creature of legend often depicted as a beautiful horse that emerges from the water, inviting those nearby to climb onto its back. But the Kelpie's beauty is nothing but a cruel facade. It is a dangerous water spirit, capable of luring humans to their watery death. The physical description of the Kelpie varies slightly, depending on the region, but most accounts agree on its primary form. A large, sleek horse with a coat as black as the deepest night. Its mane, always wet, drips with a continuous stream of water, giving the impression that the creature has just emerged from the depths. The hooves leave no prints in the ground, a subtle warning for those sharp enough to notice. But the most disturbing feature of the Kelpie is its eyes. Dark and cold, they possess a hypnotic quality, drawing in the unwary and making them forget their surroundings. In some tales, those eyes glow with an unearthly light, while in others they appear as voids, consuming all the light around them. But the Kelpie is not always confined to the shape of a horse. Some stories tell it of it transforming into a human, often a handsome man or a beautiful woman, luring its victims to the water's edge with seductive charm. However, this form is imperfect. The Kelpie's true nature is betrayed by telltale signs: wet hair, waterlogged clothing, or hooves where feet should be. You know, there's kind of a moral to the story here, isn't there? If somebody or something of the opposite sex tends to try to lure you into the water, time and time again, kind of, shouldn't go. I mean, it doesn't usually end very well, does it? But the origins of the Kelpie are as murky as the waters it inhabits. Some say it is once a spirit bound to protect the waterways, but was corrupted by dark forces, turning it into a malevolent predator. Others believe it has always been a manifestation of nature's untamed power, a reminder of the danger that lurks beneath still waters. The creature is most commonly associated with Scotland, but similar stories appear throughout the Celtic folklore, suggesting a deep-rooted cultural fear of the unpredictable and often deadly nature of water. The Kelpie resides in lochs, rivers, and streams of Scotland, with Loch Ness being one of its most infamous haunts. Unlike other legendary creatures that remain tethered to a single location, the Kelpie is said to roam freely between bodies of water, emerging when the time is right to claim another victim. And its method? Deception, of course. The Kelpie's primary goal is to lure its victim onto its back. Once mounted, the creature's skin becomes adhesive, trapping the rider in place, and then plunges it into the water, dragging its prey to a watery grave, often devouring them or simply leaving their drowned body behind. That's kind of cruel. At least eat it or something, you know? I mean, well, whatever. In some versions, though, the legend, the Kelpie can only be tamed or killed by removing its bridle, the source of its power. but few have been brave, or lucky enough, to get close enough to even attempt such a feat. Now, let's delve into some more of the chilling accounts of encounters with this spirit. Our next tale comes from the shores of Loch Marie. Remember, I'm trying to pronounce these right, but sometimes, it's me. I get used to it between having to breathe deep. Because, let's pause the story here just for a second before we get to the next story. Just so everybody knows, I feel a lot better, but my breath isn't where it should be. So I have to stop a lot and take really deep breaths, and I get out of breath quickly. So, what might only be 5 or 6 minutes, it might take me double that time to record. So bear with me if you hear me gasping and stuff. I try to cut it out and make it so you don't hear that, but you may hear me gasp. Back to Loch Marie, where a young woman named Isla lived. She had always been drawn to the loch's serene beauty, spending her afternoons sketching the landscape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a dusky purple, she saw something unusual on the far shore, a horse. Its silhouette stood out against the water, its black coat glistening in the fading light. At first, it seemed ordinary, but as she watched it, she noticed the creature wasn't grazing or moving as horses usually do. Instead, it stood perfectly still, its head raised as though watching her. Curiosity, coupled with an inexplicable pull, drove her to the water's edge. As she neared the loch, the horse turned and began to walk along the shore, its movements graceful, yet unnatural, as though its legs barely touched the ground. Isla felt compelled to follow, despite the sinking feeling in her chest. The closer she got, the more strange the horse appeared. Its hooves made no sound on the rocky beach, and the ground beneath it seemed untouched by the horse's weight. As she drew even nearer, the horse turned to face her suddenly, directly. Its dark, wet eyes met hers, and for a moment she could see her own reflection, distorted in their black depths. Her feet moved on their own, each step heavy, as if the loch itself was pulling her forward. Her hand reached out, trembling, as she tried to touch its mane. It was then that she felt a chill, a coldness that seeped into her bones, as though the very air around the creature was devoid of warmth. The moment her fingertips brushed the slick hair of the creature's mane, Isla knew something was horribly wrong. The hair wasn't just wet, it was slimy, almost like seaweed that had been soaking in the loch's dark waters for centuries. She tried to pull her hand back, but it was stuck. The horse's mane seemed to wrap around her fingers like vines, holding her fast. The Kelpie's head lowered, and as it did, its form began to shift. The beautiful horse that lured away was melting, revealing something monstrous beneath. Its skin, once smooth and sleek, now appeared mottled and decayed, hanging loosely over bones that seemed too long, too sharp. Isla screamed, yanking her hand free with the strength she didn't know she possessed. She stumbled back, tripping over the stones just as the creature let out a blood-curdling scream, half animal, half something unearthly. It charged at her, but as it did, the air seemed to shimmer, and it vanished, dissolving into the mist that rolled off the loch. Isla fled, never daring to return to the water's edge again, and she spoke of the encounter only once, to a friend who later found hoofprints embedded deep in the rocky shoreline where no horse should have been able to make such marks. Another chilling encounter took place near River Dune, where a group of children had been playing on the riverbank during the summer months. They often ventured into the shallows, skipping stones and chasing minnows. One day, as they laughed and splashed in the water, they noticed something unusual. A horse, pure white with a mane as silver as moonlight, stood on the opposite bank watching them. It was beautiful, muscles rippling under its shimmering coat. But what caught her attention wasn't just the horse. It was the golden bridle draped across its head, shining in the sunlight like some rare treasure. The children, their excitement bubbling, began to call to the horse, coaxing it to come closer. To their surprise, the creature stepped into the water, slowly making its way across the river towards them. Its hooves seemed to barely make a ripple as it moved, its body almost gliding over the surface. One of the boys, William, was the first to approach, drawn to the golden bridle. He reached out to stroke the horse's neck, marveling at the silky texture of its fur. But the moment his hand touched the animal, the air around them changed. The warmth of summer day faded, replaced by an eerie chill. The river, once clear and sparkling, darkened, and the once beautiful horse let out a low, menacing growl. William's hand was stuck to the creature's mane, the once silky hair now cold and slimy, felt like dead kelp. The other children screamed as the horse's eyes, once gentle, became black voids, devoid of life or warmth. It began to pull William deeper part of the river. Its strength far beyond that of any ordinary horse. William's friends tried to pull him away, but the more they struggled, the more the creature seemed to strengthen, dragging him closer to the center of the river, where the water churned as if something far darker awaited beneath. Just as his legs were submerged up to his knees, an old woman who lived near the riverbank came running, waving a burning torch. She shouted ancient words none of the children understood, and the creature reared up, its skin bubbling and shifting in the flame's glow. With a final screech, it released William and disappeared into the water, leaving the children soaked and terrified, with the boy covered in strange, red welts where the horse's mane had touched him. The old woman told them that the creature was no horse. It was something far older, far darker, and had almost taken one of them forever. The last tale, however, comes from a man named Ewan, a hunter who lived near the loch. I think it's pronounced Lomond, Lomond, the Loch Lomond region. Ewan had heard whispers of the Kelpie, but never paid them any mind. One autumn evening, while they're stalking deer near the loch, he found himself in unfamiliar territory. The fog had rolled in thick and fast. You know, whenever the fog rolls in thick and fast, get your butt out of there right now. And Ewan was disoriented, stumbles upon a cove they'd never seen before. The water was unnerving, still, the air silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As he prepared to head back, he noticed a figure standing at the water's edge. A man, or at least what appeared to be a man. He was tall, dressed in tattered, soaking clothes, with long black hair dripping wet. The figure didn't move, didn't even acknowledge Ewan's presence. Something about the scene made his blood run cold. He called out, asking if the man was lost, but there was no reply. Instead, the figure turned slowly, and Ewan's heart nearly stopped. The man's face was gaunt, his skin unnaturally pale, and his eyes were entirely black, like two endless pits staring back at him. Without a word, the figure pointed toward the loch. Ewan's legs felt like lead, his instinct screaming at him to run, but his body, it refused to obey. The figure took a step forward, and Ewan could hear that the faint sound of hooves clopping against the rocks. Then in a blink, the figure was gone, replaced by the shadowy form of a horse, its mouth open, jagged teeth bared, charging toward him. Ewan fired his rifle out of pure terror, the shot echoing across the loch. The creature vanished just as quickly as it appeared, leaving him alone, drenched in sweat and shaking. Ewan fled, never to return to that part of the loch again. When he told his tale to the local villagers, they simply nodded grimly. The Kelpie, they said. It comes for those who stray a little too close. These stories, well, they're not just tales to frighten children. They are warnings. The Kelpie is a creature of the water, patient and merciless. It may appear as a thing of beauty, but its true nature is far darker, far more sinister than anyone could ever imagine. So the next time you find yourself near a still, mist-covered loch, remember, what lies beneath the surface may not be a reflection of the land, but a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The Kelpie is a reminder that the beauty can be the greatest deceiver, and what we do not know about the world's darker corners can be our undoing. If you enjoyed this dive into the world of legends and lore, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. We love reviews. We love comments. Leave a comment. And if you have a chilling tale you'd want to hear about, send it our way. Who knows what other dark creatures might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered next time. Until next time, stay safe and be wary of the water.